So this evening I want to talk about the return to Eden, about Adam and Eve, about the story that really initiates our account, our Western account of what society is, of the relationship between people, between the sexes, and tell a particular understanding of that story from the point of view of the account that I've been trying to develop of, shame, violence, punishment, relationship, and what happens when we break relationship. So, I'm not a creationist, but I'm suggesting that for us now, the story of Adam and Eve can hold some kind of truth, very different perhaps from the truth which a Christian would find in it. And being me, I may sound a bit flippant. I may sound, I hope, not disrespectful, and I absolutely intend no disrespect to any deity or any sincere believer. So, with that apology and that caveat, I'll go on. And in fact, maybe I'll even start, unusually, I'll actually read you a couple of paragraphs from the commentary on the precept which we've been working on around judgment. Just an introduction, then I'll fluff this out, I'll expand on it. The judge is insistent that I'm being punished only for what I've done and in no way for what I am. This is paradoxical because the deed, what I did, is in the past, it's long gone. But I as a person am held to remain permanently identical to the individual committing it. Now, in fact, this ambiguity within the nature of judgment, being judged for what I do or for what I am, is there from the very beginning in the story that lies at the root of Judaeo-Christian myth, and hence of Western culture as a whole. Adam and Eve's expulsion from the Garden of Eden. This is the first judgment, the great judgment that inaugurates, law itself. God's commandment, his setting of the rules is broken, and he judges, determines and pronounces sentence, a sentence which is itself the shaming of Adam and Eve, forever, in an act we might call the primal shaming of humanity. From now on, Adam and Eve are denied their recognition with God, and obedience is all that can take the place of relationship. They're othered and cast out of paradise with both the symbolic and literal threat of violence. The angel carries a sword. Is the eating of the apple an isolable event, something Eve does? Or rather, is it something she is, a part of her nature? Or is her nature changed by the apple's eating? It's unclear, but what is clear is that there is no expiation possible, no resolution to be had in this world. Why would an event need to be punished forever down the generations? Why would the daughters of Eve's daughters need to suffer for her crime and, in addition to be held by it, in subservience to their menfolk? Judgment seems inextricable from shame, and both from their beginnings reveal themselves to be primarily practices of power and coercion. Eve is not expelled from society, and in a sense it's this expulsion from Eden which begins society itself. But by being judged responsible for humanity's fall, her burden of shame is used to assign her a fixed and inferior place. That she must now obey Adam is itself shaming, and she must obey him because of her shame, her shamefulness. Yeah. So, an apple's been eaten. That's really it. And so an identification has been made. This is Eve's doing. This is her responsibility. And though we know that both Adam and the serpent are very much involved in this story, it's she who's going to be held responsible. And of course held responsible by God, who in this story is the injured party, and the judge, and the jury, and in actual fact made up the rules, the laws. And we might hope, we might expect that what would happen would be some kind of resolution, some kind of negotiation, some kind of, well, where do we go from here? Not good. How do we go forward? But instead, in our terms that we've been talking about, we identify and we judge. It's Eve's fault, and she must literally carry the weight of this, bear the blame of this. And so what's the direct outcome if we're not going to attempt to find a resolution and a way forward together? Well, it's that break of recognition that I no longer know you. I no longer share with you. I'm no longer part of you in that sense. I insist on my separation. And this casting out from the garden is a perfect, strong symbol of this blame, which must henceforward be carried by an individual, and it's intended as a punishment. It's the punishment of shame. It's the punishment of pain. It'll be the pain of childbirth forever. And it's the punishment of subservience. The shame of this crime makes Eve subject to Adam. Her fault. So this is about the breaking of relationship. It's about punishment. It's about shame. And just to reinforce the fact that these are both violence, it's the angel stands there with the sword. That actually directs the expulsion itself. And it's this shaming that in a way initiates society, because it's obviously at this point that Adam and Eve recognise each other as people. They start producing other people, the sons of Adam, the daughters of Eve, and society rolls forwards from there. But it rolls forward really founded in this act of shaming, which is so symbolic of our lack, of having lost all that's valuable. And this seems to connect up directly with, well, actually, this story of the master and slave that we've been telling. The slave's slavery is itself the mark of weakness, the mark of their shame, that they were not able to subdue the master, or that they didn't choose death rather than become the slave of the master. And in actual fact, slavery, well, it's a social death. It's the lack of the ability to determine one's fate, one's future, one's relationships. If one has children, they are the property of the master, not one's own. One's very life is there to be disposed of by the master. It is not one's own. And this connection between weakness and slavery and literal death or social death is absolutely central to the story, because the motif of the story is original sin. It's the sin which the daughters of Eve's daughters carry on in perpetuity. And it's a shame about which nothing can be done. It cannot be made better, which is why it rolls. It's permanent, like slavery. It's permanent, like death. It's permanent, like a debt that can never be repaid. The interest is always accruing faster than any possible payment back can be made. And it's founding society on the basis of splitting humanity down the middle. Two halves. One hierarchically placed above the other. And that's how it's going to be. Hierarchy is the framing of the social, and a social based on lack. And as that last sentence finishes, the circle of shame is always is a circle. Whatever I've done is shameful, and because of that, it demonstrates my weakness, and it demonstrates the strength of whoever's placed over me. But as weakness is still the primary shaming, to be so placed is shaming. There is literally no escape. It's weak to be weak. And this is a kind of context in which, well, at one extreme you get the kind of ritual suicide. My life has now become unlivable. I literally cannot carry on because the shame, the pain of the shame is too great. There is only one way out. Whether that's the Japanese samurai or the villain who's been discovered in, a couple of the Sherlock Holmes stories. Here is a revolver, my man, has one bullet. I know you know what to do with it. And at the other extreme of that, it's, honour killings, which, again, we here in the West think, that's other cultures. Well, no, because famicide and domestic violence are nothing if they're not straightforward examples of honour killing. My honour has been so affronted. My honour has been destroyed. I feel such shame at your behaviour. One way we can deal with that. And it's a miserable way to live. It's an absolutely miserable way to live for all of us. And we all take part in this. We all shame. We all are shamed. We live with the weights and the debts accrued since forever. And the story of the expulsion from Eden is just, I think, really a perfect image of this. And I'm not even insisting on the whole, this is how patriarchy begins aspect, the gender things there. But no, it's the splitting, it's the separation, the splitting of us apart from each other. When we end recognition, when we don't recognise each other, when we end relationship. And last week, in the comments afterwards, we had two which I thought were absolutely perfect and really got in their different ways to the heart of what I was trying to talk about. One of which was the comment, it's like if you go and buy a lottery ticket and it doesn't come up, you actually feel this kind of little flicker of shame, this little, and it is, I tried. Which of us couldn't use a little more cash? I tried to escape. I tried to get luck to smile on me. I tried to be the special one, the chosen one, and I knew it would turn out that way. I failed. Shame. Self-judgment, self-identification as the failure, which at one level we all know we are. At one level. And then the other comment was, well, I don't even know whether I should call it shame. But I feel this pain, I feel this pull when I know I've done something which I really know I shouldn't have done, which, to be honest, I wish I hadn't done. How does that relate to what we've been talking about? And obviously that is, in a sense, the sense of shame that we're all much more familiar with, this still small voice of conscience. Yeah, really shouldn't have done that. So how does that relate to this big picture? Is it just a kind of another form of self-judgment? Well, I want to argue that it's actually very, very different. And that to actually engage with that in a meaningful way requires us to have a response that's very, very different from this idea of self-judgment. Oh yes, I can see me, I can see the act. Wrong, should be judged, should be punished. Society would do it, I'll do it anyway. Which I think is, in so many different contexts, our kind of default response to think, I'm identifying myself. So I think the alternative to that is, well, look, the pain of shame, the pain of judgment is at no longer being recognised and the infinite dangers which that presents. There was relationship here. There is no more. And that's the same whether it's the bureaucrat saying, your benefit has been cancelled, or whether it's your lover saying, I don't know who you are. Get out of here. Or I suppose dumping you by WhatsApp or whatever. What we're talking about in all its infinitely varied forms is the breaking of relationship and the pain that that causes, particularly when it's combined obviously with some kind of attempt to show that you're weak and being shamed. Yeah, but this separation itself, this breaking of relationship itself is painful. And I think that what's going on in the cases where I do recognise, and it might be immediate, it might be in the moment, it might be years later. And I know that's happened to me a few times, and you suddenly look around and you see, as if with completely fresh eyes and a completely different understanding, this kind of, oh, did I really do that? And did I not understand that that was a deep and profound breaking of relationship? That this was a failure to recognise the needs of the situation, the needs of the person that I was actually with, that, often is not that person who was very dear to me. Did I not see what I was doing there? I think this is a very different kind of response to this much more abstract. Well, in a social sense, I would be judged thus. I identify myself as the guilty party, and I will carry out society's judgment and feel bad about that. But much more intimate, much more personally connected to this. No, I broke relationship, I broke connection. And in doing so, I caused harm, I caused injury by separating myself out. And what can we do with that? Well, we have this idea, which, it's 2 words and it sounds a bit grand. But I think it's a beautiful and perfect way of saying what we're really about here. Bearing witness. I can bear witness to what I've done. How do I do that? Well, by owning it, by being with it, by sitting with it, by not rushing off, by not feeling I need to immediately do something as a response, and by not running away from it, distracting by any of the things that we talk about that we all know we do endlessly. But in that sense, owning it, owning up to it, honestly, and even in a sense without judgment to myself. Is punishment required here? Well, no. This is not a punishing kind of thing, but there will be things to be done. Might be some kind of restitution. It might be that I genuinely treat this as a learning experience. Where do I go from here? Bearing witness takes many forms, from just sitting with pain on the cushion to going out into the world, saying sorry, but most obvious one, but, infinite forms of bearing witness. Infinite forms of learning. But we can only do this. We can only do this learning, this repairing, this re-recognizing, this affirming relationship, whether that's with the specific person or context in which the injury happened, or whether it's just a genuine determination of how we might avoid making the same mistake, how we might go forward, how we might offer the world some form of bearing witness in response to that. It's really only possible if we can become, in this sense, non-judgmental about what we do, which involves holding differently the shaming that we're offered. And last time I was talking about the situation for men and women who find themselves in prison, and really the impossibility, near impossibility, of making this kind of self-aware, bearing witness response when they're being shamed from outside, they're being judged from outside. And this is something we can only do if we don't do that to ourselves, and hopefully that the world isn't constantly pushing our nose up against this judgment. Every time we do that, in a sense, in the sense that suddenly there is openness, there is possibility, there is meeting the other on some sense of equality. Again, which may involve owning fault, but actually meeting. Well, then we reaffirm what was broken at the expulsion in this moment, in this context. And I mean this all seriousness in ourselves, in the relationship which we are offering. We do return to Eden. Now, this is something which we can do every day in our encounters. But of course, while it's hopefully very possible at the micro level of this interaction with this person in this context, the real issue is how we do that collectively. How do we meet? How do we bear witness to the cycles of shaming and other forms of violence, of punishment, which we see going on around us all the time? I'm sure there's no simple answer. I'm sure there's no universal panacea for this. We're not suddenly going to find that paradise is all around for us or for anyone else, but in these moments we can make just as we exist in nirvana when we do. We can make Eden here and now. When we realise it's not a condition, it's not about knowledge, it's not about being in the right mental state or even frame of mind. It's a way of meeting the world as the world, a way of meeting others as others. And in that, there is freedom, openness, possibility, meaningful equality. Can we return to Eden in this moment, at this moment? I guess our practice is finding out.